Good morning to everyone. I want to thank you so much for, after completing registration, joining us for this seminar. The Biocultural Education and Research Program has a mandate of conserving the plant biodiversity on island and through vehicles of education and research. Obviously, we hope to extend our program to other islands across the Caribbean. But before we do that, we need to understand our local biodiversity, its relevance, sharpen our tools for sharing our findings with our general public, and arming them with the capacity to make decisions regarding how they interface with the biodiversity. And from our end, research allows us to look deeper and to find more and interesting information that we can share. I'm happy to have you UE undergrads. We had some of you, a small working relationship. Then we celebrated the inaugural Caribbean Tree Planting Week. And we did some planting at the Walker's Reserve. And I hope that this relationship will continue. For today's seminar, we're focusing on a study that we recently conducted in the Scotland district. And we're going to take you through the importance of generally, why do we need to conserve biodiversity and what our findings were, pardon me, and how we intend to use the information that we collected and what research activity we hope to continue. All teaching sessions that I am a part of, I prefer them to be interactive. I do not like a session to go where I am the only one sharing, giving information and speaking. I like to make sure that we have our listening group being part of the exercise because it adds so much more. And to go through the presentation for you, I'm going to ask if a few of you would make some comment about why you wanted to attend the seminar and what you hope to gain, and give me a little bit about your background and how it relates to the subject at hand. So if you could have that discussion before we get into the presentation. So it's open to you. I must apologize because I came on and spoke about the biocultural program and I didn't properly introduce myself, but I know you know who I am. But for formality, I'm Dr. Sonia Pierre, Executive Director of the nonprofit. I came out of years of academia wanting to have my background be of more immediate value to the public, because I have this feeling, and I'm not singular in having this feeling, that our knowledge and research and our findings are very comfortable on bookshelves and behind those locked cabinets, but it's not getting out to where it is useful. And we tend not to think that the general public would have an interest in the things we're doing. And I have found it to be not the case. In many cases, they're yearning for something uplifting, to engage them, for them to maybe challenge themselves and become involved in something new and different. So could I have a few of you, please?
Hi.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully y'all can hear me as well. My Wi-Fi is a little spotty. So I mean, originally I got introduced to all of this through the tree planting week because I'm really about wanting to plant trees because it's so important for us to plant various trees and so on. Because deforestation happened and long time ago, and we barely have gullies left back. But this seminar, I'm hoping to learn basically a lot about the fact that the Scotland district is a key biodiversity area. And I didn't even know that there was a link between traditional medicine and what you can find there. So I'm really just here trying to learn about all these new and exciting things that hopefully this will offer.
Great, thank you very much. Can I have a few others, please?
Someone messaged in the chat.
They have a problem connecting. Okay, she wants to learn something new. Thank you very much, Amanda. Anybody else, please don't hesitate. You guys are going to be the ones out there, shortly enough, having to share your knowledge and excite a community about the information that you want to share. So here is an opportunity to begin to get involved in that activity.
Good morning. For me, well, I was also one of the original crop of people that came in with the tree planting project. But I've been following the latest in traditional medicine in terms of what the program has been doing. And I think it's really important for us as young people to continue to grasp traditional knowledge as the next generation, and keep that alive. So it's also very important for us to learn about one of the few areas or few unspoilt areas in Barbados where essentially the development is hindered, and that might be a good thing for us in terms of preserving whatever cultural knowledge or benefit is held there. So I'm really excited to learn about what could come out of the Scotland district, both in terms of cultural knowledge and then for further research.
Great, thank you very much. There's a lot of history, of course, linked to the establishment of the island. Only a couple of days ago, I went to the archives department because I've been asked to write an essay about the efforts made by the enslaved for survival in terms of their dependence on plant biodiversity. And of course, whenever you're looking into old documents, quite a lot is revealed. And I was reading about, who we address as the colonizers came to the island, they were fascinated about the diversity of plants here to the point where they considered them as exotic. Of course, in all of the writing, no mention is made of the horrific underbelly of their botanizing, which was the forced labor, most of it imported from Africa. There's no mention about that interplay whatsoever, but they were expressing this supreme excitement about the biodiversity that was found here on the island, to the point where it was sort of a race to see who could have the best collection of plants from, what was found here, whether in having that collection in preserved form or having them growing in their gardens. We hear about Chelsea Gardens that we send up a contingent to every year, but apparently there was an area that was then also, this is we're talking about 1600s, 1700s, an area that they refer to as Chelsea Garden as well. And they were busy establishing what plants they could within that garden so that, you know, they had talking points where people would want to come and visit. And I reference that because we are immersed in what is left of that biodiversity. I mean, they went about clearing dramatically so that they could install the sugarcane plantations. And so ultimately, a lot of that biodiversity was lost on the island. And I'll address that a bit as I go through the presentation. But the point is that there was an excitement for them about what plants we had here. You know, it was simply, some of it was looking at beauty of the plants, but some of it was based on their knowledge of plants and their value. And we have lost that connection with our plant resource. Quite often we're seeing it as bush, we're seeing it as nuisance, but the plants, all plants have an important role to play. And those of us who've studied biological phenomenon, we put it that way, are the basics of biology without it being elaborated, in that there's this relationship between plants and us. The plants give us oxygen and we use that oxygen to break down what carbohydrates we need to give us energy. We release carbon dioxide and the plants take in the carbon dioxide. So there's a cyclic relationship between human and plant life, animal and plant life generally. And we seem to have been disconnected from that. And this is part of the work that we want to do, is to get persons to reconnect with the value of plants and then be invested in their conservation. So is there anyone else who would like to make a comment before we begin? Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Just let me know if everyone is seeing the screen, or rather if there's anyone not seeing the screen or hearing me, please let me know before I continue. Okay, so I'm going to take that as a resounding yes. Great. So welcome again, generally, to our seminar on plant biodiversity in the Scotland district and the link to traditional medicine. Again, I am Dr. Peter, and I bring to our nonprofit the background in education. Of course, I was in education for 30+ years, chemical education, but in terms of research, I focused on natural products, and in focusing on natural products, you often use plants as a resource of those natural products. This is in research. It's not only plant life that we use, but in my case, it was plant life. And in using plant life as a resource, I became invested in understanding more of that interrelationship between humans and plants. And I'm not discounting the other animals, but I got invested in the relationship between that interdependence between plants and humans. And I recognized then that we had a heritage, we had traditional knowledge, and we were losing connection to that traditional knowledge. How were these plants used by our ancestral individuals? We know that the Barbados population was highly developed from Africa. I'm being sensitive about the terms I use because I don't want it to appear not sensitive. I don't like it when we use the term political when we're looking at social issues. But anyhow, we know that the percentage of the Barbadian population is based on ancestral links to Africa. And therefore, that traditional knowledge that has persisted within Barbados had its origins in Africa. And this is one of the things that we have become disconnected from. Again, I am not ignoring that our population has other segments, but I'm looking at the percentage of the population with those links to Africa, and therefore the bulk of traditional knowledge would be steeped in the traditional practice that came over with our people from Africa. And this is what we have lost. And there is this relationship between biodiversity and biocultural traditions. The two go hand in hand. And that makes sense because if you've got a biocultural tradition that of course is depending on plants, the only way the tradition can continue to survive is if the plants continue to survive. The only way the tradition will continue to survive is if the knowledge is being passed on through generations. And therefore, we see the importance of attacking this issue of conservation at both ends, at the end of plant knowledge and at the other end of transfer of that plant knowledge. So we need to make sure that those two keep in balance in order to make sure that the biodiversity is conserved and the tradition is also conserved. And as I said in the introduction, please do not hesitate to have an intervention. If you want to ask a question, make a comment, draw on any knowledge, whether it's from something you studied, whether it's from a family tradition, please don't hesitate. I want to also let you know that or reinforce that this is a two-part delivery. This morning's delivery is to give you the fundamentals in terms of what we found in the Scotland district, what are the types of information that we wanted to gather for our study. And then the part two, where we take you into the field, is where you get to actually see the plants if you haven't seen many of them before. And it's at that point that we will look at the linkage between the plants and the traditional medicine. It doesn't mean that I will not mention some here as we go through today's session, but today's session is giving you the baseline of that biodiversity information that we got and what we were looking at in our study. But I believe that when we go into the field where you actually see the plants, and I could tell you what plants were used during slavery for what purpose, that full connection will be made. So here is the content of the session this morning. We want to, of course, delineate the study area. We want to have a discussion as why it is important to know our plant biodiversity and hence aim to conserve. What are the plant families found in our field study? What type of species we found? And when I say per habit, we're talking about whether we could categorize the plant as a shrub, a tree, or a herb. What are the assessments that we were making that would indicate to us that we had features of adaptation that could be important as we look at the challenges imposed by climate change. And I will share within that context some of our data set. And we're going to look at what is this link to traditional medicine. I've begun to give that some perspective. This would be in summary. So the Scotland district, we can see in this map, is focused on the easterly side of the island. And I know that I am, as they say, preaching to the converted, because we all know where the Scotland district is. But what we may not know is the extent of its positioning within those easterly lying parishes on the island. And our next slide demonstrates that. We see that the Scotland district has quite a bit of its biodiversity area located in St. Andrew, but we've also have it spreading into St. Joseph and into St. John. So this is likely a bit new for you, that you knew the general area, but the expanse of the Scotland district, you probably were unaware that it stretched from St. Andrew into St. John, and there is even a small section of it pushing into St. Thomas. You know, we use that coastal section of the Scotland district because it's like a different part of the island. Well, for me, when I am there, that is what it feels like. Yes, it is a different part of the island, but for me, the ecology, the ecosystem in that part of the island always seems very distinct. And I believe that this is one of the reasons for it becoming a rich source of our plant biodiversity. Part of it, of course, is also because it's an area which is not highly developed. When we speak of the expanse into St. Andrew, St. Joseph, and St. John, we're looking at areas where it's difficult to establish residential communities. We know we have some there, but there's no heavy sense of building because it's the more rugged part of the island, and hence more difficult to establish residential communities. And it may be because of its ruggedness and the fact that it has offered resistance from our willingness to set up and claim positions on the island, that it has become a site of biodiversity which we have to conserve. We know that the other parts of the island, therefore, are not, did not show that resistance because their topography is different. It was easier to really set up, and therefore, this is where a lot of the clearing would have taken place. And actually, the early setup of plantations were mainly around the south and the west coast of the island. So we went into the district, Scotland district. On screen is who I consider to be our senior program assistant. She was with us from the early beginning of our program and has made a very important contribution to where we have grown today. That is Dr. Jamila Jones, also a UB graduate. And I always talk about the fact that she discovered a bacterium that naturally breaks down our bagasse into small molecules that could be used for medicinal discovery, or even looking at the whole issue of generating biofuels, and should be someone who is given support needed to carry that research forward. the ears who have listened so far probably don't have the capacity to pick up on what I'm saying. But we are working to send grants out there and get additional funding so that we can expand our research and incorporate Dr. Jones's research as well. Also, though this is probably not a good image that I chose, but I chose it because it shows her hard at the work of searching out this biodiversity. This is our, well, she came to us after Jamila, and therefore I don't want to call her junior program assistant because that's not fitting. But she has been very instrumental in setting up our website. The way that you easily entered into this virtual classroom is her work. And she is also part of the group online this morning. So Krista Padmore, I am thanking you right here for all you have done in helping the nonprofit to grow. And Krista led the ecological study, did a magnificent job, and she will be the one guiding the part 2 tour into the Scotland district as our field tour. And I'm looking forward to you interacting with her during that tour. Another view, of course, the conditions then were much drier, and you can see that. But these are the tracks that were traveled in order to find out what is there in the Scotland district. I do not want to claim in any way that this is the first study conducted there. There have been other studies conducted. I think the CERMI Center at UWE would have done some work within this region, of course, but I think that we are giving it that unique perspective where we're looking at the plant species, not in isolation, but we're looking at them in terms of their value to our human existence, and also their greater value, because I argue that if you are not aware of what you have, then you are less invested in the need to conserve it. And so we're trying to take a different approach to look at the plant in a more holistic manner in terms of all that it is doing and what it can do. And that type of information would give persons a better perspective as to why we need to conserve the plants. So why is there a need for conservation of plant biodiversity? This is a chart obtained from, you can see monkbay.com, where they were charting the rainforest remaining as of 2020. And we see on the right-hand side, this is over a longer period, 2002 to 2019. Of course, what the pie chart is showing that the bulk of the world's tropical rainforest and biodiversity is located in the Amazon, and that's the green portion of each of the pie charts. And we know that this has been a talking point for quite a long time, that if we do not hold on to that section of rainforest, that the fallout is going to be severe. What is interesting is that we fall into the sort of royal blue segment, which represents the holdings within other tropical climates, and it is about 6%. I have to adjust my glasses at times. So we fall into that small percentage on the global scale, which makes sense. We're really a small group of islands, but as we continue, we will see that we hold a lot of important aspects of biodiversity. And it indicates for programs that are really quite rigorous, that will not simply work to conserve the plants. From my rationalization again, but it has to be people driven. We need to arm people with the information that they would want to keep our contribution to this global protection of biodiversity. At the bottom, we see the chart telling us about plant cover and tree cover. And though it looks as though it has been stable, it is way below what it should be in terms of harnessing that capacity, of course, for carbon sequestration, but also in terms of providing us with the materials for survival. We have become rather sophisticated and have decided that we want to move ourselves as far away as possible from natural green spaces and living naturally in harmony with these green spaces. But it has been a mistake. Living in what is described as the concrete jungle, in my opinion, has been a mistake. We, are often led by looking at what looks to be modern, what looks to be, a different and a unique perspective. But we need to take a step back and look carefully at where that has taken us and how we can now gradually move back to living in harmony with green spaces. And with all the knowledge that we have acquired, we can do that differently. We do not expect that we'll be going way back in terms of how, we interfaced with plant life around us, because that was also not perfect. And it would be naive to claim or believe that that was perfection as well. But the concept of working in harmony that was in our earlier way of interfacing, interacting with our plant life is where we need to go back to. And there's been a lot of shift in that direction. And my point is that where we can, we need to make a contribution. I always say it may be a small contribution, but every bit adds up. So the point here is that we need to be aiming at increasing our plant cover, our tree cover, and this is being demonstrated, as we know, by our Caribbean partners in the Caribbean tree planting project. So what is this importance about plant biodiversity? The Caribbean is noted as a biodiversity hotspot with high degree of endemicity. I'm going to read these points and then I'll go back and develop them. High plant biodiversity provides resistance to environmental change, provides sources of novel phytomedicines, provides a range of materials that we can make use of, woods, fibers, resins, and of course, food. So, this sets it out. But what do we mean when we say that the Caribbean is a biodiversity hotspot? I typically look at it two ways, although environmentalists tend to look at a hotspot as one where we need to shift our focus and look closely at what is happening in that area in terms of the need for conservation strategies. But I also view it as, because we see it as a spot that we need to focus on, it means that there's a lot of very important plant life in that area that we need to give greater focus to. So my argument is, yes, in terms of you looking at biodiversity as it relates to number of species, density of species, number of plant families, etc., that complexity in itself offers so much that we need to be aware of. And the need for conservation is the need for conserving all that the plant has to offer, all that the groups of plants have to offer. So my perspective on the idea of a hotspot comes with a little modification. I don't know if you would like to make an input on that, or am I saying the same thing? I happen to think that I'm looking at it with a more in-depth appreciation of what is in this so-called hotspot, and how we need to probably improve our strategy by letting persons know what is in this hotspot as a reason for working together to conserve what is there. Would any of you care to make a comment about that? Remember, it's a two-way contribution. So I'd be interested in if you see my position as different, or is it more of the same? What is your opinion? No opinions?
I mean, all I can really say is that, as you said before, I don't think it's that different, but more like you were looking at it from a more in-depth, well-researched point of view. So you would have a deeper understanding of it. So I don't know.
Thank you. When I was your age as well, and I was asked to comment on issues like that related to my area of study, or even outside of my area of study, you tend to hesitate because you think that you don't have enough of a background to say something of value. It happens. But I'm just telling you that that's not the case. Because all of us have an understanding of our environment and our surroundings and how it impacts on our living. And you don't necessarily have to have gone in depth to study in a particular area, but in appreciating the related concepts, you can still have an opinion. So I don't want you to hesitate from that perspective, thinking that, you will not make a comment of value. Please don't hesitate. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Okay. Thank you for considering me. Okay, so I think these 4 points are very clear. That we need the plant's resistance, of course, if not only in terms of pulling in carbon dioxide. For me, that is such a simple thing, but we have a great percentage of the global population that doesn't understand that you have greenery, you pull in carbon dioxide, you get back out the oxygen that we need to breathe. In addition to that, when we talk about endemicity, we're saying that these plants are found in the Caribbean only. I mean, how amazing is that? Amazing from our perspective that we are living through the period. But of course, endemicity exists all across the globe. But I think it is amazing that we can sit and understand that we've got plants in the Caribbean that you can find only in the Caribbean, okay? And if you've got these plants that you can find only in the Caribbean, then it means that there are novel applications for these novel plants. And that is my perspective. So what is this Caribbean biodiversity and endemicity? I'm going to have to apologize for the noise in the background. It's unexpected, and we're living within communities, and these things will come up. But I hope you're not having any difficulty hearing me. So here we have the Tropical Conservation Fund, indicating where these hotspots are around the globe. And like I said, there are many, but we see our Caribbean hotspot right here. And it stretches over that group of small islands. Geologically, because we have been separated by swaths of ocean or sea, there is this discussion as to whether we are in the Atlantic or in the Caribbean Sea. I say we're in the Atlantic. Anyhow, because we're separated by water, over time, it has allowed for this development of species unique to the islands. So we are part of this global network of hotspots, as you see here. So what is the story of the hotspots in the Caribbean? And this is extracted from the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund. They do great work in terms of collating information on our overall biodiversity. And I have extracted that which relates to our discussion about plant biodiversity. So I'm going to read from the slide, but again, what it reinforces is the uniqueness that we have in the region and why we should protect it. So it says the botanical diversity of the Caribbean island hotspot is extraordinary. Those are the terms used, and I tried to also relay that to you. It's special and unique. While the land areas are relatively small, the islands support a native flora of 1,520 genera and about 11,000 species of seed plants. Of these, 192 genera and 7,868 species. Sorry, I'm reading that incorrectly. Of these, 192 genera and 7,868 species are endemic. Imagine that. 72% of those 11,000 species are unique to the islands. Now that alone should be a driving force as to why we need to conserve the plants in this region. It says endemic plant genera, which will be the broader group to which species will fall under. And we'll look at this as we go into the Scotland district proper, are concentrated in the Greater Antilles, especially Cuba and Hispaniola, the largest and most heterogeneous islands. And Cuba is said to have about 50% endemicity. In other words, of the collection of plants that Cuba has as native plants, 50% are found only in Cuba. Again, I think extraordinary in terms of the information that conveys. If you're looking for new medicine from a plant, where do you want to go? Cuba. If you're looking for a new fiber, where do you want to go? Cuba. If you're looking for a new wood, maybe, where do you want to go? Cuba. Because you're likely to find something that is new and unique, new in terms of it being applied within a bigger platform. And here we have two species endemic to Cuba, and they're both of the cactus family. And the one on the left looks quite dramatic to me in terms of its color, profile. It actually looks like an artistic piece. And the other one is also of the cactus family. And this one seems to have more of a tree-like formation. And there are many aspects of the beauty of plants that we can capture. And the biocultural nonprofit is actually producing a coloring book highlighting the plants of traditional value in Barbados. And this is going to be launched sometime in November. So what did we find within the Scotland district in terms of biodiversity? We were able to collect, I will say 42 species. We were aiming for 50, but whenever you have a research project, you have your initial protocol, and then when you get into executing your research project, you always will find a time when you have to review that protocol and see how best to modify it to still attain most of your objectives. So though we collected close to 50, we've got some of them that we're still working on identification. And so we have, for certain, 42 species that we are well aware of what they represent, which families they belong to. We've got their images. We've been able to sample within our protocol. And so what I speak of here represents those 42 species that we collected. Now, of those 42 species, they represented a total of 25 families. So the family is a bigger group, and that is then subdivided into genera and then into species. So in our 42 species, we found that we had 25 families represented. Number of these families with only one species, and please remember that this is in relation to the 42 that we collected. We have not, of course, sampled the capacity within the Scotland district. That is not feasible from 1 week of study. So we're talking about the collection of our 42 species. We found that 18 of the families represented had only one species present. We had 2 families. We had 1 family with 2 species. We had 3 families with 3 species. We had 2 families with 4 and 1 family with 5. So what we're seeing here is that there are some families that have greater distribution within our sample. And we're actually going to look at one of the more populated families as an example of the diversity in the Scotland district. So what are these families that were most represented in our collection of samples? So we see here what it was referencing. The Fabaceae family is otherwise referred to as the pea family. So there were 3 species representing the Fabaceae family within our sample. The Asteraceae family is also called the daisy family. Typically, they've got these beautiful flowers, pretty much like the sunflower, but much reduced. And the Asteraceae family actually is one that is globally found to be a medicinal family. Many of the plants of this family have found medicinal usage and on a global scale, and that is also seen within Barbados. The Asteraceae is one of the families that we turn to when looking for active agents for healing. Euphorbiaceae is the most populated family within our sample, with 5 species. And I will add here that this is not a casual occurrence because the plants that we find within our landscape are the result of animal intervention. Whether their seeds are spread by other animals, including humans, it's also related to our dependence and use of the family. And this is what we speak of when we talk of biocultural tradition, a tradition that is based on our linkages with our natural biology, and our use of plants allows their existence to persist. So it is not, for me, a casual thing to see that our sample is representative of our human dependence on Euphorbiaceae. You may ask, what is this human dependence? And then we look through the historical documentation of plants that were found more useful within the healing systems developed by the enslaved. We found that Euphorbiaceae showed up quite frequently. And I wrote a paper recently and submitted it. And it's not everything that we do has a positive outcome. And my arguments as presented were not accepted by those who were published in the journal. And I don't hesitate to say that because all of the scientific discipline and using your knowledge will always be plus and minus. We do not know everything. It's impossible. All of our interpretations will not be accurate. But for me, when I looked through that listing, I saw a connection to Euphorbiaceae. And I could substantiate that connection because the Euphorbiaceae during the period of slavery was often used for the healing of trauma, whether it was a wound, a deeper wound, a surface cut, a skin problem, swollen limbs, ankles, arms, digits, what have you. The Euphorbiaceae was listed as being used for that purpose. And when we look even closer, we find that the Euphorbiaceae, of which the poinsettia is one, and I know that all of you probably have had some link with poinsettia. You know that when you break the poinsettia leaf from the stem, it gives you that white exudate, which is a latex. It's called a latex. And within that latex, it has been found chemically a rich collection of compounds that have this application for healing abrasions, whether it's wounds, deep wounds, it's cuts, skin irritations, what have you. And part of that is an enzymatic system that is useful for getting rid of dead cells, and then other agents which promote the buildup of your skin cells and the act of healing, causing a wound to close. And for me, that is not by accident. I think traditional usage and knowledge acquired over time led the individuals to recognize that we had on the island Euphorbiaceae, similar to plants that they would have engaged back home, and then relied on these plants to heal their physical trauma. And like I said, I presented this argument. I also used listings from the parts of Africa where our ancestors were mainly brought across the Atlantic from, which is Ghana and Nigeria. And again, they felt that the linkage that I spoke of was not strongly enough interrogated. And I will have another look at it but I thought the evidence that they presented was a true indication supporting that traditional knowledge brought over from those parts of Africa were seen within the documentation as to how the Euphorbiaceae was used within the healing platforms during slavery. The other two families that were populated within our sample, the Verbenaceae, of which plants like blue vervain belong, and Boraginaceae. So let us look at the examples of Euphorbiaceae that we found within our study. The first one up is a shrub called Croton flavans. And in speaking to persons, this was not information obtained immediately from the Scotland district, but it was obtained from persons living within a similar coastal environment on the island. And after I related how Croton flavans was one of those plants used during slavery for wound healing, the individual related to me that in recent memory for her, it was still being used. She said that as children, when they went climbing where probably they should not have without their shoes, and they got injured and went home, their parents would tell them, well, get a few leaves from, it's called seaside sage, squeeze it to get that latex from it. This one gives a clear yellow latex. Squeeze that, put it on the wound, and you'll be fine. So confident were them in the properties of Croton flavans for healing that they simply told their children what to do, and it'll be no problem. So they were quite confident in the healing power of this plant. So again, this is random sampling. We did not go looking for any particular plant, but we wanted to capture the natural distribution. And Croton flavans is one that has a moderate density. I wouldn't say it's high, but especially along the East Coast Road itself, you see a lot of Croton flavans growing quite well. It's a shrub, meaning that it branches out broadly instead of growing tall, and therefore something easier to access in terms of being used for its medicinal value. If we look a little closer, we see what the leaf looks like. It's a rather textured leaf, and when we take you into the field, you'll have your opportunity to actually get a sense of that. And it's shown here at a closer. It's very textured on the surface. Both the upper side and the underside is very textured. So what is the value in that? Outside of the fact that it has this latex for healing, is it acting to sort of cleanse the atmosphere because it can hold a lot of particles on its much textured surface? Is it a form of the plant trying to hinder, insects or other agents from attacking it? What is the purpose of this much textured surface? All questions that we will be looking into. This is another example of the Euphorbiaceae, and this is a small version of the tree that can grow to 15 meters tall, which we call the man chenille tree, scientific name Hippomane manchinella. And this also produces this latex, but it is said that what this plant produces, and you probably do know the stories because I feel that this is part of our tradition that has been passed down, that you should not eat the fruits and be careful going around this plant. And that is because its latex is highly basic. It's described as a caustic latex. And though There's one other plant related to this, but of a different species, which was used again during slavery for healing, and its toxicity is also referenced. So you have to know how to use this plant for healing. Again, topical healing and not by consumption. I once had a relative who came to visit the island and saw these fruits and decided to, well, it looks inviting, let me bite into the fruit. And of course had negative experience, put it that way. Because if you consume too much of this fruit, it can cause your system to gradually deteriorate. So toxic is the agents that the plant produces. And this is in terms of protecting itself within its environment. But we also have found creative ways of using what the plant produces. We made an effort, of course, though random sampling, to make sure that our sample represented the different categories that we can fit a plant into in terms of the habit, whether it's a tree, whether it's a shrub or a herb. So here we have an example of a herb. Also important to us is the role being played, as I mentioned, by the plant. And this one was found quite well established within the more sandy sections of the Scotland district area. And you can see that quite clearly here. As we take a bigger look, we see that it has these leaflets. And if we look even closer, the leaflets have a succulent look, beautiful small flowers. And this is a characteristic of Euphorbiaceae, not necessarily the succulent part of it, but the way in which the leaflets are arranged. They're described as being opposite to each other. You can see how they're set apart along the main stem. Many Euphorbiaceae plants have that particular characteristic. So the role of this environmental role that this plays, of course, is binding the sand together as it's a ground cover plant. And our question is whether this is a plant that we need to look at for stabilization. It's growing naturally. It's playing a role. Is this a role that we could expand? We actually had a group of students from the McGill Bellairs Research Institute, and they were looking at plants, again, along the Scotland district that could be useful in walls and roofs for cooling. So is it possible that we could use a plant like this to establish a roof? It will form a layer of cover and add a natural mat that would be cooling both on the roof covering. Of course, there's a particular system that you have to put down to have that work effectively, but could we also install it on a wall? You've seen images of plants growing along a wall. Could we use that as a cooling system, especially within our hotels? It probably would be a challenge to have persons understand why we are asking them to grow plants on their roof and on their walls, and they may not see it, but within a hotel system where it can add value to the philosophy behind the hotel in terms of being green, and also something that has an aesthetic and will add to the look of the hotel. And it may attract the tourists that we label as an eco-tourist. Now, this was an exciting find. Krista, like I said, who is the one that really went out into the field for us, and she did a walkthrough of Turner's Hall, which is considered one of the protected areas on the island. It is the only part of the island where you can go and find plants that you will only find there. Doesn't mean they're endemic, but in terms of their location on the island, you will only find them within Turner's Hall. And we were looking for our two endemics. This high endemicity that we're hearing across the rest of the Caribbean, we do not have that because we had significant clearage during the period of the 1600s to the 1700s, as there was this mad rush to establish these sugar plantations so that they, what is casually called sugar from the sugar cane, which is sucrose, could be extracted and parceled back to Europe so that they could have tea. As casual as that sounds, that really was the driving force. Anyhow, that's another lesson altogether. So when Krista reported to me that she thinks that she found one of the endemic species, I was thrilled because I have to confess to you that I've been trying to see this plant in the wild for ages, and it's Krista who found it. This lovely plant, again, is of the Euphorbiaceae family. It is a shrub, and it has a distinctive pattern to its stem, its network of stems. And this plant is only found here in Barbados. Let's have a look at it. You know, I think we just don't value these things enough. But this plant is only found in Barbados unless someone takes it from the island and then looks to establish it elsewhere. But this is endemic to Barbados. We only have 2 species, and in our study, we only found 1. And this is the one that we found. And she only also found 1 plant. Can you imagine that? Suppose this is the last one of this particular plant, and it's in Turner's Hall. Just think on that. I hope that that is not the case, and we will continue our journey in looking for, my understanding is that it's located elsewhere on the island, but I'm telling you that I've been trying to find it in all of my acts of going out looking for plants, and I have never found it. So we don't know for sure, but my understanding is it's elsewhere. But we know for sure there's 1 plant in Turner's Hall. There may be others, but Crystal only came across 1 of these plants. Okay. I see that we have some comments in the chat. Krista, I want to ask you to check on the comments for me. If there are any questions, let me know what the questions are. Okay, so I'm hung up on this endemic species. They need to continue. This is another of the 5 plants that we found in our sample. I'm keeping track of the time because I don't want to take you beyond our scheduled time. This also, if you take off these buds, what you get is that white latex, which is a healing latex. In addition to looking at the number of families that we had represented in our sample, number of species per family, we also wanted to take a look at root systems and the value of these plants in terms of what their roots were doing. So I already looked at the Euphorbiaceae species that was forming ground cover within the sandy areas of the district. But what are the different types of root systems? Here to the left, we can have what is described as a tap root system, where you have a main root that grows vertically, and then you have smaller extensions from that main root. And that system as a whole is anchored by the tap root, but in expanding laterally, will offer binding of the ground cover as well. Then in the middle here, we see what is described as a fibrous root system. And this is the type of system more found in the plants that are described as grasses. And the plant root system generally spreads. So there's no main tap root, but you've got a spreading network of fibrous extensions that make up the root system. And I would say that this is one of the reasons why grasses are the first to become established within an ecosystem, because they have a way of really holding on to the soil. And those of you who try to establish those lawns that are not natural know that the normal or natural grasses that are adapted to our environment quite readily grow in between your lawn, and then you spend all of that time. I'm sorry, I'm not accusing you. That you is a broad you, using what agents you can to get rid of the grasses that are just inhabiting their natural environment. And that's because they're so deeply rooted and they make such a connection with the soil that it becomes well established. And we see that as a nuisance when in reality, the plant is doing what it can to protect our ground cover, our soils. And then we have what are described as adventitious roots, and they seem to appear off the shooting parts of the plant, what we consider to be the stem. They seem to appear from the stem, and typically you've got these where you've got the stem growing laterally as well, and then the root emerges from that component of the plant stem. So what is the value of looking at root systems? We see in this lovely chart, extracted from Washington State University online publication, what the roots can do. We have here that the grass type vegetation help to maintain absorptive capacity, slows the velocity of runoff, and acts as a filter to catch sediment. I know that this is always spoken of, but when we remove our soil cover, then we allow the action of water to take greater hold, leading to erosion, flooding, etc. It says here that ground covers protect the soil, which is what we're saying. The larger trees absorb the energy of the rain so that the damage that the rain itself, when it's forceful, can have on the soil is buffered by the larger trees and the shrub. Transpiration from the leaves of the plants removes water from the soil, and the roots of shrubs hold surface soil together. So the plants within the environment are playing all types of roles, and therefore we wanted to also look at the root systems of our plants to see which of them was playing a more major role in terms of this binding of the soil surface and also helping in terms of channeling water. And so one of these that we looked at is this species, which is somewhat of a succulent. It is called seaside samphire. And notice that these names all reflect the ecosystem in which the plant tends to find itself, a more coastal ecosystem. And this one was also found as really excellent ground cover within the more sandy soil type found along the Scotland district. And here we have the system from this plant. And This is more of the adventitious type root system, where we see our stem here and the roots coming off of the stem. So there's no main tap root, but as you will see when you go into the field and you attempt to extract this from its soil surface, you will find that it is rooted at many points along the stem, and in so doing, again, it forms a good mat or cover. And so for the species that we could disrupt them, disengage them from the soil surface in order to have an examination of their root systems, we took the imagery, and this will all be elaborated because the book is going to be written, capturing all of the species that we discovered and the attributes they have, and a summary of the importance of the plants to the ecosystem. The next parameter that we looked at was stomatal density. So why would we want to look at stomatal density? This is extracted from a paper by Hetherington et al., a number of individuals, looking at how stomatal density can be used as a marker for sensing environmental change. It was published in the journal Nature. And these are some very important statements here extracted from that population. It reads a description of what the stomata represents: the small pores on the surfaces of leaves and stalks that regulate the flow of gases in and out of leaves, and thus the plant as a whole. They adapt to local and global changes on all time scales from minutes to millennia. So apparently this is a very dynamic factor that each plant possesses. And we'll look briefly at how they work. Recent data from diverse fields are establishing their central importance for plant physiology, evolution, and global ecology. Stomatal morphology, distribution, and behavior respond to a spectrum of signals from intracellular signaling to global climatic change. So here is our reason for opting to look at stomatal density. I thought that this would be a key feature of the plants within the Scotland district that we would want to establish, because it tells us how the plant is armed to respond to environmental change. And when I saw these points as given within this publication, it reinforced that my thinking was accurate. I'm not a biologist. I am a natural product chemist. And though I initially had a greater love for biology, the chemistry and the molecules of nature pulled me more into that focus. But I am still highly aware of the importance, of course, of all natural systems. And I felt that looking at stomatal density would be an indication of the plant's ability to withstand environmental change, average of higher temperatures than normal, whether we have conditions of heavy rainfall, conditions of low rainfall. I thought that the stomatal density would be an indication of how readily the plants could respond and be another marker for our conservation strategy. And again, these points reinforce my thinking. So what are stomata? It has been described that they're the small pores on the surface of the leaf. Not sure how many of you have delved into biology as one of your sciences, but I think many of you. So again, I'm not describing features here that are new to you, but these stomata, or small openings, are guarded by what are described as guard walls, guard cells, and the guard cells will either take in water and hence provide the shape for the opening across which transfer of gases happen, including water vapor. Although technically, as a chemist, I should not call water vapor a gas because water within our atmosphere exists as a liquid. So it's more correctly referred to as a vapor. So it will modify the shape that will allow exchange of gases and water vapor. And if it is going to modify the shape, it has to take in water, and then it loses water, then the size of the opening and shape is going to be much reduced. Now that has an important linkage, because what it means is that when water is abundant, the guard cells are going to be swollen or turgid, and the stomatal opening is going to be such that you get more rapid exchange of gases and water vapor. Then there's a deficiency in water. It means that the cells are going to shrink, the guard cells are going to shrink, and the opening is going to close, and we're going to get a restriction of exchange of gases and also water vapor. So this is a mechanism or the mechanism by which the plant responds to regulate water loss. It's one of the ways to regulate water loss, but the plant also has to balance this issue of having the spaces open to the leaf to allow exchange of gases, taking in carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen. And so a decision, I know we think that a plant does not have a brain, but we have to look at a brain with a new perspective. The entire system of the plant, we can say, is its brain, and the plant will adjust to its environment and adapt to know when it should open and when it should close. And we find that what the plants tend to do is to open when the temperatures are not that high, where water, if we look at the natural system now, the drier the air, the greater the tendency for water to leave the plant and go into the air to replenish what is being lost in the air. And so during extremes of temperature, the plant is going to remain closed, and then they will open as the temperatures begin to ease up. So the plant has a brain. We think that a brain has to be located within our ideas of what a brain is, but we have to look at a brain as with a totally different imagination. At least that is my perspective. So we did this. We took leaf samples with the assistance of another of our program assistants, Nicole Seeley, who is another UV graduate. I think I omitted to state that Krista is also a UV graduate with her major in ecology. Nicole Seeley, UV graduate with her major in chemistry. And we looked at our leaf samples by taking images, or is images? No, because that's not accurate. We took imprints of the upper and lower surface of the leaf, and then we did microscopy of those imprints, to get an idea of the frequency of stomata within the 42 species that we collected. Important terms here being adaxial for the upper leaf surface and abaxial for the lower leaf surface. If you remember, when we looked at the seaside sage or croton flavins, there was a distinctive appearance for the underside relative to the upper leaf surface. So the abaxial had a different character to the adaxial surface for that plant, as we were looking for the 42 species to look at that difference. So here I share with a couple of the plants what we found. And we again used the seaside samphire I have fallen in love with this plant from the first time I saw it. I happen to love the appearance of the leaves. They're shiny, they're dark green, the stems are succulent, and then they've got great ecological value as well. So looking at the adaxial surface, this is what we found. We can clearly see the guard cells, and to me, they look somewhat turgid in this imprint. And we can also see the space, the pore. At this magnification, we cannot see a big pore, but if we went to a greater magnification, I'm sure you would see the dimensions of the pore. But the frequency here is a good one. In this image, I can see about 17 within this area, and we would have the facility to calculate the area that was being examined under the eyepiece, and this would have been standard for all of the plants. So this is the upper leaf surface, and this is the lower leaf surface. And what we can see here is that the hole, the pore is more visible. And we can see, again, the guard cells that form that pore. And this is the lower surface. And I would expect the lower surface then to have a wider pore, because the upper surface is the surface that the sun is going to beat on and create the environment for water loss, where the abaxial surface, being hidden from the sun, can engage more to allow for gaseous exchange. So this is, to me, as expected. There seems to be a lower frequency, however, but again, this is an imprint, and we can speak about the imprint. There may be a bit of layering that's happening there that's not visible, but generally it looks like there's a lower frequency for this abaxial surface. Here's another plant that is important for ground cover. I know you all must have seen this as you frequent the coastal side of this part of the island. It is called seaside bean. It has a lovely pink flower, and it has a bean, an actual bean. I am not aware of it being used within our food system, but who knows, this may be something that we can explore, but it's playing a big role in terms of stabilizing the sandy soil within the Scotland district. Again, not sure how many of us appreciate that, but this we will elaborate on in our book. We take a closer look, we can see it's a vine, and again, it has an adventitious root system, and it really is very good at holding on to that sandy soil. And here is the frequency of stomata on the surface of those leaves. The adaxial surface, here we can see the pores much better. So this plant could be in terms of what it was being exposed to at the time, as we did collect them at different times. So at that point, this plant was more comfortable having its pores open. We can see the guard cells and the lovely image. This one has about the same frequency on its upper surface as the seaside samphire. On its lower surface, in this case, the pores are not as evident. They seem to be closed. All right, let me go back. Yeah, this has a daxial, but this is the abaxial leaf surface. And I'm gonna argue here, this plant lays very close on the ground. Seaside samphire, though it offers ground cover, it has more of a vertical component to it, whereas seaside bean is laying very close to the sand. And this could be a measure because of the leaf making more contact with the hot sand and the potential for it to lose more water from its abaxial surface. A little bit of speculation on my part, but I believe that may be the reason for us not seeing the open pores on this surface. So let us move on. We're doing well in terms of time to the phytochemistry and resistance. Again, we don't really appreciate the fact that plants are exposed to all of the stressors that we are exposed to. Right now, we're dealing with the virus COVID-19, and we know what, as a people, we are going through. But plants go through these negative interactions with microorganisms as well. And so you'll hear when we incorporate plants for healing, that plants are demonstrating antibacterial properties, antifungal properties, antiviral properties. But these are defense mechanisms that the plant has been able to evolve to protect itself within the environment. And therefore, if we have a look at the phytochemistry of the plants, it's another marker we can use as to its ability to resist environmental change, which may include the more prevalent activity of antimicrobial species. So here we have, we can see where this information was extracted from. Extracted because of the visual, that the phytochemicals that the plants will produce allows it to respond to abiotic stress, change in conditions of water, temperature, pH, etc. Biotic stress, change, as I said, in the nature of the microbial population that it's exposed to, and also allow them to interact with each other, which is something that only now, again, as we look more, the more we see, the thinking is that plants interact with each other through their root system. So if a plant has responded positively to a negative impact, whether it be abiotic or biotic, it can respond through it can communicate through its root system with neighboring plants in terms of letting them be aware. And please remember, we're saying this in context, letting them be aware of how they're finding a solution and pass the message along. So there's a lot of work now looking at how plants communicate through their root systems. So the plants produce a collection of what we call secondary metabolites. And these secondary metabolites are for their protection. They fall into categories of natural products. And again, these categories have been developed for more coherent study of function in relation to structure. So when we talk about polyphenols, we're talking about a class of natural product with a particular structure. When we speak about alkaloids, likewise, terpenoids, likewise. But we see here that they're all fall under the category of defense compounds that the plant is going to biosynthesize for itself. And then we also capitalize on these natural agents and find them useful for our health and also for other applications, whether it's flavor or color. So in order to investigate the phytochemical complexity of our plants, we use thin layer chromatography. Here we have a group of plant secondary metabolites that were extracted not from this study. Some years ago, I had some graduate students and we were looking at some particular plants, and our objective then was to take the plant, subdivide it, dry it, then use alcohol to pull the agents out, which would be a lovely complex mixture of natural agents, and then use methods of analysis to separate that lovely complex mixture into as many as we could find. And all of those powders that you see there in different colors, some are white, some off-white. There was a yellow one and what looks like a burgundy one. Those were all individual compounds that we were able to extract from a particular plant. And it's just beautiful to be able to see the compounds in this perspective, because we look at a plant not really understanding that a plant is a chemical laboratory of its own, and it has all of its platforms in place to make its own chemicals as it needs to protect itself. We are able then to demonstrate with our knowledge how we can take that plant and find out what is useful. So this is some of the work. This work has been ongoing, and we will be doing thin layer chromatography of samples collected. But as I've mentioned before, students of the McGill-Bellairs Research Institute have been working with us to run some of the experiments that we're going to be using to show how useful they can be in examining the phytochemical complexity of plants. So this plant, I think this is also seaside bean. This is how we break it apart. There was alcohol, likely methanol used to break it apart and pull out its green agents. Well, it will look green because of chlorophyll, but in addition to chlorophyll, all of the other agents will be there. And then we put that on a plate, a thin layer plate, which is a metal plate, very thin, and it's coated with an adsorptive agent called silica gel. I know I probably do have some chemists on board, so you know what I'm talking about. And then we place our original extract at this point, which we call the origin, and we allow a solvent mixture to move across the adsorptive surface. And when that happens, the individual components will tend to separate because they move at different speeds along the surface, depending on their structural characteristics. We also have to be mindful that when we see a separation into a defined area, as we have here, it does not mean that we have one individual compound. What we may have is a collection of compounds with similar features, and they accumulate at that point along the chromatogram. But here, these are natural colors as this plant gave up its individual components. Again, there are also many that are not colored that we cannot see, but this is natural. There wasn't anything else done but applying the sample at the origin and then allowing separation to take place. So here we have the chromatography plates at the end of that separation. Same plant material, 2 individuals. So we see a difference in terms of the look, but what we do see is that we got separation at the same point. And again, I remind you that though each of these are indicative of separation, it may not be one individual compound. We know that these brightly colored points represent what we call carotenes, and these are similar to the compounds found in carrots that give them their color and their health properties. Carrots are indicated for prostate cancer because of the protective nature of carotenes. So then what we do is to add an agent that will highlight compounds of a particular class, because this is what we want to find out. We want to establish, do these plants carry some of the compounds that you saw noted in the slide before, the polyphenols, the alkaloids, the terpenoids, because these are all protective natural agents. These are all natural agents that the plant produces to protect itself. And these are all natural agents that when we take the plant and use it for medicine, that we depend on. Polyphenols, for example, are potent antioxidants, and antioxidants are implicated in establishing good health by scavenging for what we call free radicals, and these free radicals can cause the corruption of your cellular matrix. They can cause corruption at the level of your nucleic acids, your DNA, and this can lead to onset of disease. So the thinking is that antioxidants are good for health because it puts the body in a better physiological state. The body has its own system of antioxidants, but if we are not in good health, or if we are aging, your natural system does not work as well, and should be augmented by antioxidants in the diet. Antioxidants are located in brightly colored fruits and vegetables, your carrots, your beets, your sorrel. We know pomegranate became popular on the global stage, though we've had pomegranates all around us and we see them on the tree and ignore them. But those rich colors are the result of potent antioxidants, and they're important for good health, and they are polyphenols. So here, we are able to demonstrate that seaside bean is, I want to say loaded, because this was a very small sample, and all of these blue spots represent polyphenols. And what is interesting is that because they are appearing at many different points along the chromatogram, it means that they've got quite a variation in structural features, and in essence offers a complexity in the polyphenol composition within the plant, which offers opportunity to respond to various diseases. The bigger the complexity within your phytochemistry that is for the plant, the more able it is to respond to environmental change that impacts on its health. And so seaside bean, we have shown, has quite a series of polyphenols with different structural features. And it will be interesting as we go on to actually determine what these structures are, but this is for the future. It's important for us to be able to say that this plant has a polyphenol profile, and hence is armed to protect itself, and is a plant that we want to make sure is in the environment, because it will be able to better respond to negative environmental change. So in summary, and I think I'm in good time, this study is going to provide useful baseline information on the 40 species collected. We have also collected herbarium samples for all of the plants. I know it says 40, but it's 42 that we are confident that we have all the data we need on. We have herbarium samples of all of the plants as well. And it's important to have a herbarium sample to make sure that when you speak, that you're speaking of the correct plants, and each of them are numbered. And again, I'm thanking Krista for putting that in place. We're going to be looking closer at the importance of these plants in traditional medicine. We know of the application by a number of them, some of which I looked at for the euphorbiaceae, but they're the other families that you will see when we go on the field study. And this will be explored in part 2 of the seminar. And here, this is just a view of a collection of plants. I think that we have samples of many of these. The point is that what I'm seeing here is a collection of, plants making an important contribution to the environment in which they're growing. They're plants living in harmony with each other. And, they're telling a story, a narrative that immediately doesn't shout out to us. But that is the story and the narrative that we are trying to have our public fully able to understand by sharing the language by which they communicate silently. So that's the end of our presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and then look for some comments and feedback. Brittany, would you want to, as the leader of the group? Okay,
Hi,
Jessica,
Sonia.
would you like to make on behalf of the,
You can hear me?
but we're not.
Hello.
I can kind of hear you, Brittany.
You can hear? All right.
Your volume is just kind of low.
It is?
Yeah, but it's getting better.
Yeah, we're not hearing you.
All right, let me try to fix that for a minute and I will come back.
Okay. Jessica, would you like to make a comment?
My comment might seem a little strange, but I was interested in a very short section about the type of roots and how you said that plants basically can communicate with each other through their roots, and telling them like, hey, there's a nice set of water over here, or this area is really hard to live in. That really drew my attention because I thought, well, how some plants interact with each other on the surface, like some would help each other's grow like by covering them because they can't take too much sun, or I don't know,
Yeah.
parasitic type situations. So would you be able to go in on the roots situation there?
Well, yeah, it is something that is being investigated more and more, because my statement was the more we look, the more we see. So this is actually work that is maybe trending in terms of understanding how root systems communicate. And when we say communicate, I believe it is in terms of what the root system may put into the soil that can then be picked up by a neighbor, and what the presence of that agent in the soil triggers within a neighboring plant. So it's about the system of communication. So when we're saying that the plants are talking to each other, they're using a language that we wouldn't understand immediately. But if we look closely, understand it's one of a molecular signal. The plant sends out a molecular signal in the soil to its neighbor. And then the neighboring plant, in absorbing that molecule, will be triggered to likely, make something similar, or understand that it's a need within the environment in which it's located. So it is something that is trending, because in our effort to, again, the value of these plants and how, they capitalize on what's in their environment in order to display.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Because then I also was thinking about how, in aquaculture, there's the issue of sometimes the root systems are very connected with each other. And if there's a disease with the roots, it's easily spread throughout the system. So that is along the same lines of how they communicate technically.
Correct. Yeah. But I think that one
Okay.
be a little easier, because it's pretty much like COVID, isn't it? That if you are infected and you're too close to your neighbor,
yeah,
organism can jump ship. So that's pretty much like what's happening with COVID, and it's kind of, I think, that we have to give little more attention to educating the public. I think that the resistance we're finding within the public is because of limited communication, and different persons will develop a confidence depending on, whether they're getting what they need via the method and systems of communication. But yeah, that transfer is easy. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
A few other comments before we close. Other comments?
All right, you can hear me properly now?
Yes, Brittany, we can hear you.
Okay, well, so far the whole thing is new to me, but like certain compounds that you mentioned, we were actually introduced to chemistry. So I basically get a grasp of like a bit of organic chemistry. So I'm now more comfortable with the topic. This is still kind of new to me, because I know, like I said, I'm now developing like a green thumb now when it comes to like planting, because of the tree planting. And know that we have the opportunity to actually see like a bit of heritage from these plants, as well as and that's basically all the grasp from the whole concept.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's what's important is this investment in understanding what we need to protect. And then, you can develop your personal or individual platform as to how you're going to engage once you appreciate that this is something that you want to support. So I want to thank you all for signing up, for attending, for listening. I would have liked to have a little more discussion, because I think it's by discussion that you sort of get to consolidate what has been shared. But I think it was important for us to expose you to what's along our Scotland district. And when we go into the field, we will do more of that. We will be communicating through the WhatsApp group for the field trip on the 28th, I think it is. And yeah, I hope I'm not wrong about that date, but anyhow, I am thinking that we can collect you at UV. And I will just look for a confirmation from all of you that we can do that. So we collect you at 10 at UV, maybe by the entrance to the campus, by the guard hut, so that we don't have to go on the inside. We can park hopefully in the little parking area next to the guard hut, collect you there, and we're going to go along the East Coast Road, because that road has quite a collection of plants that have been used in traditional medicine. And we're going to show you some of the ones that we discovered and what ecological role they're playing. And as I mentioned, what role they played in traditional medicine. We're going to give you some information, sort of. We don't want it that we go there and show you everything, but we'll probably take you to an area and see how many plants you can recognize in that particular area based on descriptions that we give, so that it is more an active participation, which will make it more meaningful. So again, I want to thank you, and thank you, Krista, for joining us. Or Naya, you want to, please go ahead. Naya.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say,
Yes, we can hear you.
I haven't done anything science related probably since third form, so almost everything here was new to me. But I just joined so that I could get a perspective on different things, because I think it's important to know things outside of your degree. So I was here taking notes and screenshotting the pictures and the different things and what they mean, so you can do research later. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear that. That is what excites me, because that is so true, that we should always try to add to our capacity, and the way that you described your interaction makes me quite happy. Thank you so very much. So I look forward then to challenging you when we are actually on site in our field trip. We hope to make it exciting and not run of the mill. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And you can look out in the chat group for further information about the field study. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, and you too.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Hold on a bit, please.